Hi there. We're going to start our first conversation on our new series, Knowing the Times. We're engaging culture, engaging conversations. Right at the start of this, I want to set out almost like the rules of engagement. And this week, we're going to start off by looking at being a peacemaker, because part of engaging some of the questions we're going to be looking at around sexuality and gender, racial reconciliation, climate justice, greed and materialism, mental health. Part of that is really going deeper with one another, inviting new people into these new conversations, which will require maybe some conflicts, maybe some disagreement, maybe being forthright. And we want to be able to do that really well. So this week we start off with being a peacemaker in turbulent times. Just at Christmas, I was around extended family, and conversation went to a point where one of my family members like, "Oh no, don't worry about that." When it sensed there was a little bit of tension when we talked about something that maybe was a bit more of a contentious issue. And it was straight away, it was like a sense of, no, don't go there. That might involve some conflict or disagreements. And we wouldn't want that at Christmas, of course. But many of us in the families, the culture, whether east or west, have grown up with avoiding conflict, recognizing it as a bad thing, something to avoid. And with that often comes, it festers, it gets, bitterness can even come into situations, and it goes into this kind of unconscious or shadow side of our personality, and it can come out in all the wrong ways. I say that from my own personal experience. It can sometimes explode in us or implode in us. So avoiding conflict isn't necessarily the right way about going about it. And we can all avoid conflict, can't we, at different times? And the church has, over the centuries, you might think the church has never avoided conflict. It's always been at the heart of conflict. Look at the history, Alan. Look at the wars that have been fought around different doctrines and denominations. And yeah, absolutely, we've done conflict badly. I want to talk about how we can maybe approach it differently, look at peacemaking in a different way. But there are times where the church has kept silent on issues of race and sexuality and gender, the climate, these things we're talking about. And it has festered, it has left us with a lack of integrity, a lack of authority to speak into these issues, or even speak into the lives of people who God loves so passionately, because we've been silent on them. So we don't want to be silent anymore. We do want to find our voice, and we want to do this in the right way. So avoiding conflict is often seen as a way of doing peacemaking. But I want to suggest to you, actually, we need to do conflict in the right way. We need to approach in the right way. And we are living in turbulent times. We live in an atomized culture. Everything is separated and disconnected. We have tribalism. We have echo chambers, people in their silos. People can't hear each other. People can't listen to one another. And it seems like we're in a very divisive age. So we need to learn to speak to one another in a new, fresh way, and learn to listen to one another. And as the journey, this is why we have most of our time as the church gathered around the table, around eating together, around fellowship and listening and praying for one another. So we want to confront this moment, this time in our history where there is this deep division. We want to bring peace into these situations. We don't want to just confront people and cancel people because we don't like what they say, or we feel like they're from a bygone era. We want to really listen deeply to one another. So how did Jesus approach conflict? Was he avoiding it like the plague, like we can do nowadays? How was he a peacemaker? Well, let's just remember who followed Jesus, his original 12 disciples who became the apostles sent ones. They were from very different backgrounds. You had a tax collector in the mix representing the state structure, the oppressive Roman Empire. And you also had a zealot, a Jewish zealot, which would have called for armed insurrection against that Roman Empire. And you had very working class fishermen in the mix, and all different personalities, some real hot-headed guys in there as well. So you have Jesus at the center of this, He's the peacemaker. He's the one who holds it all together, but very different people who are circling around him. You then have in the early church, and what the heart of the gospel is not that the Judaism, the Israel, the people of God in the Old Testament would stay, that faith in God would stay in the boundaries of that, but actually faith in the God that Jesus reveals is universal. It's for everyone. So the Gentiles, the non-Jews, are invited to participate in relationship with God, in a righteous, faithful relationship with God. Now, how much conflict did that bring? Massive conflict, massive colliding of worldviews, Greek worldview, Hebraic worldview, and different practices and behaviors, and hundreds of years of animosity. So the gospel, it does include conflict. You have it with Jesus, the 12 he brings around, and you have it right at the heart of the gospel where it goes out to all the different nations, the Jewish and the Gentile coming together in the person of Jesus Christ. And then you obviously have Jesus. What does he deal with? He deals with conflict within his 12. Regularly, he has to deal with conflict and confronting the powers of the age, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. I mean, this is how he was crucified. He was crucified, he was put to death by man. Men put him to death. And it was the rulers, that not just the religious rulers, the Roman rulers that licensed that crucifixion, that execution. So Jesus confronted it. The crowds left him when they didn't like what he had to say. So Jesus was not a man who was afraid of conflict. He clearly, it took courage to approach this peacemaking duty. So Jesus shows us that. And we pick this up in Matthew 5:9, where Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God." He says right at the heart of our identity is peacemaking. He is the peacemaker, and we as his image bearers, as followers of Christ, are peacemakers. It's our identity. Maybe that is something you need to realize or recognize today, that you're a peacemaker, that this isn't a personality type. This isn't a certain Myers-Briggs test to say, well, you're or an Enneagram, that's the peacemaking type. No, we're all called to be peacemakers. Yes, even in our diverse and different kinds of personality. And we can recognize also peacemaking is not about avoidance. Jesus brought together Jew and Gentile. He didn't avoid that. He didn't create different religions. He created faith in one person, Jesus Christ, and expressed in the multitude of different cultures and nations all around the world. And we recognize peacemaking takes courage. It takes real courage to confront the rulers and the unjust powers and the systems of injustice that tangle people up in our day and age, and with poverty and trafficking of people and corruption. It takes courage to bring peace into situations. Now, let me just read from Luke 6 before we finish today. And this is where Jesus is talking about how we approach our enemies. And he says this to his disciples: "I tell you, hear me, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who ill-treat you. If someone strikes you on one cheek, turn to him the other also. If someone takes your cloak, do not stop him from taking your tunic. Give to everyone who asks you. And if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. So this gives us a bit of a paradigm, an approach to our conversations. Maybe we could even say, where it says, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Which is the heart of this. We could say, if you listen to those who listen to you, what credit is that to you? And I think that's the heart of humility, of generosity, of heart towards others, and wanting to deeply understand people. So what if we committed the next few weeks as we approach these hot topics, these issues and these kingdom areas, with a heart committed to listening for understanding, a heart that might be hard for you, or that might not be too hard. It might be like, yeah, I listen for understanding. I'm kind of trained. That's my job. I'm listen to understanding, pick up. I listen well, and I know there's a number of us who are very skilled at listening. But it might be that goes up another gear, especially when it's on certain, in different things we're listening for. But what if you spoke up for truth and justice in a new way, or just brought your perspective in a new way? What if you commit to that? I will speak up. And we had this generosity at this forum where we were generous to one another, that we weren't being cancelled, we weren't being labelled, we weren't having all of that, like everything's recorded and it'll be brought back like a tweet that we make 10 years ago, like, oh, this is what you said. I had that recently. Someone said to me, oh, you said that 5 years or 10 years ago. And I was like, oh my word. I'm glad I don't go on Twitter, hey. Finally, what if we committed to deal with conflict? So when it does arise, we look to deal with it well. We don't avoid the difficult conversations. So we're going to now pray and listen to one another and listen to the Spirit of God. Because in the context of God's Spirit, we will discover what God's heart is. Thanks for listening.